The county sheriff showed up at my lake house on a Tuesday morning while I was frying eggs. I heard the tires on the gravel first, then a knock so firm it rattled the screen door. When I opened it, 2 deputies stood on the porch with their hands near their belts, and the taller one looked at me like he was staring at a dead man. "Sir," he said, "can I see some identification?" I told him my name. He didn't blink. He asked again, slower this time, like maybe I hadn't understood the question. "I heard you the first time," I said. "I'm Russell Voss. This is my property. What's going on?" He glanced at his partner. The partner shook his head slightly, the kind of gesture people make when something doesn't line up. Then the tall one spoke again. "Mr. Voss, you've been reported missing. Your wife filed a report 9 days ago. She told us she believed you were dead." I stood there holding a spatula. Grease was popping on the stove behind me. The eggs were burning. I could smell it, but I didn't move. My brain was doing that thing it does when the information coming in doesn't fit the shape of your life. You hear the words, you understand the language, but the meaning won't land. "Dead," I repeated. "Yes, sir. She indicated you left home without notice, stopped all communication, and she feared the worst. There's an active search underway. Your photograph has been distributed." I set the spatula on the counter. My hand was steady, which surprised me because something behind my ribs had started to collapse very quietly. Not panic. Something older than that. The feeling you get when you realize a person you trusted has been building something behind your back, and you're only now seeing the scaffolding. "Come in," I said. They stepped inside. The cabin smelled like burnt butter and cedar. I showed them my license, my phone, the receipt from the hardware store in town, dated 2 days prior. One of them called it in. I heard fragments through the radio static. Subject is alive, confirmed identity. Location is the Ridgewater property. The tall deputy, his name tag read Kimball, sat across from me at the kitchen table. He had the kind of face that doesn't give anything away, trained neutral, the expression of a man who's learned not to react before he has all the facts. "Mr. Voss," he said, "when did you arrive here?" 12 days ago. And you've been here continuously. Haven't left except to drive into town for supplies. Twice. Maybe 3 times. Has anyone been with you? No. Have you spoken to your wife? I paused. Not in about 2 weeks. He wrote that down. Any reason? We had an argument, I said. I came up here to think. I do that. I've done it for 40 years. She knows where this place is. She has the address. She has my numbers. He nodded without expression. She told us your phone was off. Full signal. I pulled it from my pocket, held it up. Full signal. Battery at 61%. It's been on the whole time. He looked at it, then at me. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not suspicion. Recalibration. We'll need a formal statement, he said. And we'll need to notify your wife that you've been located. Go ahead, I said. I'd like to know what she says. After they left, I sat at the table for a long time. The eggs had turned to rubber in the pan. I scraped them into the trash and stood at the sink, looking out the window at the lake. The water was flat, barely moving. A heron stood on the dock like it was waiting for something. I watched it until my breathing slowed. Then I called my daughter. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice cracked before she even finished my name. Dad? Oh my God. Dad, where are you? I'm at the cabin, I said. I've been here the whole time. Mom said you disappeared. She said nobody could reach you. She filed. I know what she filed. There was a pause. I could hear her trying to hold herself together and failing. She was 53 and she sounded 12. Dad, she told me you might be gone. She said the police thought. She said they were checking the river. The river. That detail stopped me. I live nowhere near a river. The cabin is on a lake. A still, shallow lake where the deepest point barely reaches 15 feet. But a river suggests current, suggests a body carried away, suggests something that can't be recovered. There's no river here, I said quietly. I know, she whispered. I know that now. After we hung up, I made a pot of coffee and sat on the porch. The heron was gone. I thought about my wife, not the woman she was when we married, not the version I carried in my memory like a photograph. I thought about the woman who had stood in front of law enforcement and told them I was probably dead. I thought about the word she used, feared. She feared the worst. That's a word people use when they want to sound emotional without committing to a lie. It floats. It can't be pinned. I've been in commercial real estate for 37 years. I know what positioning looks like. I've sat across from men who smiled while they moved clauses around in contracts, rearranging risk like furniture. My wife was not a stupid woman. She was organized. She kept files, kept lists, kept track of expiration dates on insurance policies the way some people track the weather. That thought, the insurance thought, arrived uninvited and sat down heavily. I went inside and opened my laptop. I hadn't checked email in days. That was the point of coming up here. Disconnect. Reset. But now the silence I'd chosen looked different from the outside. It looked like disappearance, like evidence. There were 42 unread messages. Most were routine, but 3 stood out. 2 from my insurance carrier, 1 from my financial advisor. The insurance emails were confirmations. Policy review requested. Beneficiary verification in progress. Both sent 6 days ago. I hadn't requested anything. I called my advisor. His name was Cecil Pratt, and he'd handled my accounts for 15 years. Dependable, meticulous, the kind of man who returns calls within the hour even on weekends. "Russell," he said, and I could hear the relief. "I've been trying to reach you. What happened? Your wife contacted me last week. She said you were missing and potentially deceased. She asked about the process for accessing your accounts." I closed my eyes. "What did you tell her?" "I told her we'd need a death certificate or a court order." "She wasn't happy about that." "Did she try anything else?" He paused. "She asked about the life insurance, the term policy and the whole life. She wanted to know the timeline for a claim if a body wasn't recovered." The air in the room changed. Not dramatically, quietly, the way pressure shifts before weather arrives. "Cecil," I said, "I'm alive. I've been at my lake house. I'm standing in my kitchen right now." "I know that now," he said. "But Russell, there's something else. She brought someone with her to the appointment." "Who?" "A man. She introduced him as her attorney, but he didn't have a card, didn't give a firm name. He did most of the talking." "What did he look like?" "Mid-50s, gray at the temples. Confident. Familiar with financial language." "Did you get a name?" "She called him Dominic." I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the pattern. You don't bring an unnamed lawyer to a financial advisor's office. You bring a partner, someone invested, someone who knows the plan because he helped design it. I thanked Cecil and hung up. Then I called my daughter again. "I need you to do something," I said. "Go to the house. Don't confront anyone. Just look, Dad. What's happening?" "I'm not sure yet, but I need eyes there." She called me back in 40 minutes. Her voice was different now. Harder. The kind of hard that comes from seeing something you can't unsee. "There's a man here," she said. "At the house?" "In the house. His car is in the garage. Tennessee plates. There's mail on the counter addressed to someone named Dominic Sorrento." I sat down. Not because I was weak, because the room needed to stop moving for a moment. "Is your mother there?" "I don't think so. The car is gone. But his things are everywhere, Dad. Clothes in the closet, a razor in the bathroom, a laptop on your desk." "How long?" It looks settled, not like a guest, like someone who lives there. I told her to leave. "Don't touch anything. Don't speak to anyone. Just go." She argued, but she went. After that, I made one more call. My attorney. Not Cecil, a different kind of lawyer. The kind you hope you never need. Her name was Ingrid Chen. I'd used her once before, years ago, during a dispute with a former business partner. She was precise, unflappable, and she never asked questions she didn't already know the answer to. "Russell," she said, "tell me everything." I did. The missing persons report, the insurance inquiries, the beneficiary verification. The man named Dominic living in my house while my wife told the world I was dead. I laid it out the way I would a deal sheet. No emotion. Just sequence. When I finished, she was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. "She's trying to have you declared dead," Ingrid said. "How?" "In most states, if a person is missing and no body is recovered, you can petition the court for a presumptive death declaration. It usually takes years, but if there's evidence of danger, if the circumstances suggest the person couldn't have survived, the timeline shortens." "The river," I said. "What river?" "My wife told my daughter the police were searching the river." "There's no river near the cabin." "That's not a detail she confused," Ingrid said. "That's a detail she planted. If the story is that you wandered off, disoriented, near a body of water with current, the assumption becomes that you drowned, and the body was carried downstream. No recovery expected. Faster timeline for a declaration." I looked out the window again. The lake was still flat, still quiet. "What do I do?" "You come home," she said. "Alive, visible, documented. We go to the police, we revoke any powers of attorney, and we start pulling records." I drove back the next morning. 5 hours on the interstate. I stopped once for gas and bought a sandwich I couldn't eat. The whole drive, I kept thinking about the word feared. My wife feared the worst. She feared I was gone. People say that when they want something to be true. I went to the sheriff's department first. Deputy Kimball was there. He brought me into an interview room, not because I was a suspect, but because the case had gotten complicated. He told me what they'd found since confirming I was alive. "Your wife filed the report on a Friday," he said. "She told us you'd been acting erratically, that you had a history of depression, that you'd mentioned the lake. But she wasn't sure which one." "I've owned that property for 22 years, I said. "She's been there 100 times. He nodded. "She also told us you'd been having memory issues, that you'd wandered off before." "I've never wandered off in my life. We know that now. But at the time, the report was credible. She was emotional. She brought medical records, medical records, prescription history. She showed us documentation of medication for anxiety and a sleep disorder." "I take melatonin," I said, "over the counter. I haven't had a prescription for anything in 3 years." He pulled out a folder. Inside was a printout, my name, my date of birth. A prescription for a sedative I'd never taken, filled at a pharmacy in Nashville. The prescribing doctor's name was unfamiliar. "This isn't mine," I said. "We're looking into it," he said. "The pharmacy confirms it was picked up in person." "By whom?" "A man matching your general description. He presented your insurance card." There it was again, the outline, the shape of me worn by someone else. Not close enough to fool anyone who knew me, but close enough to fool a fussy clerk, a records office, a system designed to trust documentation over intuition. I gave Kimball everything. The insurance emails, Cecil's account of the meeting, my daughter's description of the house. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, he leaned back and exhaled through his nose. "Mr. Voss, this is beyond a missing persons case." "I know," I said. "We're going to need to involve fraud and potentially the district attorney." "Good." Ingrid met me at the house that afternoon. My daughter was already there, sitting in her car in the driveway, engine running. When she saw me, she got out and held on to me for a long time without saying anything. I let her. Some things don't need words. We went inside together. The house looked the same from the outside. Same brick, same black mailbox, same Japanese maple by the front walk that my wife had planted the year our grandson was born. But inside, the air was different. Not just the smell of another man's cologne lingering in the hallway. Something structural had shifted. The filing cabinet in my office was unlocked. Drawers I kept organized by year were shuffled, folders missing. The safe in the closet had been opened, not forced, opened with the combination. Ingrid photographed everything. She moved through the house like a surveyor, documenting angles, timestamps on her phone, narrating quietly into a recorder. "The safe," she said. "Who had the combination? Just me and my wife. What was in it? The deed to the cabin. Insurance policies, our wills. A copy of our trust agreement. All gone?" I looked inside. Empty except for a single envelope. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten note in my wife's script. Clean, unhurried, the penmanship of someone who had time. It said, "I'm sorry it had to be this way." I handed it to Ingrid without a word. She read it, then placed it in a clear plastic sleeve. "That's not an apology," she said. "That's a confession." Over the next week, the picture filled in. The police traced Dominic Sorrento through DMV records. He was 56, originally from Knoxville. No criminal record, but a long history of short-term addresses and dissolved business entities. The kind of man who exists on paper just enough to look legitimate and not enough to be pinned down. He and my wife had been communicating for at least a year. The detective assigned to the case, a woman named Lena Briggs, who actually came to interview me in person and cross-referenced everything I said against physical records, pulled phone logs and email metadata. The volume was staggering. Hundreds of messages, calls at odd hours. A pattern that started slow and accelerated sharply around the time I began planning my trip to the cabin. "They were waiting for you to leave," Briggs said during one of our sit-downs. "The moment you were isolated and off the grid, she moved. Moved how? Within 48 hours of your departure, she contacted your insurance carrier, your financial advisor, and 3 separate banks. She presented a power of attorney you signed in 2019. For a surgery," I said. "A knee replacement. It was supposed to be temporary. It was never revoked." That hit harder than I expected. Not the betrayal. I'd already absorbed that. The mechanics of it. The way something I'd signed out of trust, out of convenience, out of the simple logic of a man going under anesthesia and wanting his wife to handle things if needed, had been filed away and weaponized years later. Ingrid revoked it within the hour. Emergency motion. Judge signed off same day. The banks were cooperative once the police got involved. 2 accounts had already been partially drained, not emptied. Smarter than that. Small transfers, spread over several days, routed to an account in Sorrento's name. Enough to fund a departure. Not enough to trigger immediate fraud alerts. They'd calibrated it. The life insurance inquiry was the part that kept me awake at night. My policy was substantial. I'd built it over decades, adjusting coverage as the business grew, as grandchildren arrived, as the math of legacy became real. My wife was the primary beneficiary. She knew the exact amount. Cecil confirmed she'd asked specifically about the timeline for a claim without remains. She'd used the phrase presumed deceased. She'd asked it calmly, as if she were asking about a refinance rate. The hearing happened 3 weeks later. Not a trial, a hearing on the fraudulent missing persons report and the related financial activity. The courtroom was small, municipal, the kind of room where the flag in the corner leans slightly and the clock on the wall is always 2 minutes fast. My wife arrived with a private attorney. Not Sorrento, a real one this time. She wore a navy dress and small earrings, no wedding ring. She didn't look at me when she sat down. The judge, an older man with deep lines around his mouth and the practiced patience of someone who had spent decades separating theater from truth, reviewed the case file in silence for several minutes. "Mrs. Voss," he said finally, "you filed a missing persons report on May 3rd stating your husband had disappeared, and you feared he was dead." "Yes, Your Honor." "Your husband was located 12 days later at a property you knew about, with a phone that was on and functioning, in a town where he'd been seen by multiple witnesses." She didn't respond immediately. Her attorney leaned in and whispered something. She nodded. "I was genuinely concerned," she said. "He left without telling me." I told her the morning I left. I said. My attorney placed a hand on my arm. I waited. Ingrid stood. Your Honor, we have phone records showing a text message sent by Mr. Voss to his wife on April 21st, informing her of his departure. The message was read. We also have Mr. Voss's cell phone records showing the device was active and reachable during the entire period. Mrs. Voss made no attempt to call or text him at any point. The judge looked at my wife. Is that accurate? Her attorney spoke. My client was in a distressed state and may not have. I'm asking her. My wife swallowed. I don't remember the text. But your phone shows it was opened. Silence. Ingrid continued. She presented the insurance inquiries, the beneficiary verification, the power of attorney usage, the bank transfers, the pharmacy prescription filled under my name by someone else. She presented the photograph of Dominic Sorrento entering and exiting our home. She presented my wife's handwritten note. The judge read the note twice. Then he removed his glasses and set them on the bench. Mrs. Voss, he said, this note says, I'm sorry it had to be this way. What did you mean by that? Her attorney objected. The judge overruled. My wife looked at her hands, she said. I was planning to leave the marriage by reporting your husband dead. She didn't answer. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the second hand on the crooked clock. The judge referred the case to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Charges were filed 3 weeks later. Filing a false police report, identity fraud, attempted insurance fraud, conspiracy. Sorrento was picked up in Memphis, driving a car registered to my wife with 2 suitcases and a folder full of documents bearing my forged signature. The divorce was final by autumn. I didn't contest anything except the cabin and my business assets. She didn't fight for them. Her attorney advised cooperation, given the pending criminal case. The house sold in November. I didn't want it anymore. A place where someone else had slept in your bed while your wife rehearsed your funeral isn't a home. It's a set. My daughter helped me move what I wanted to keep. Books, photographs, my father's watch, a painting my mother made of the lake before she died. The rest I let go. Furniture is just furniture. Things are just things. What matters is what they meant when you acquired them. And those meanings had been hollowed out. I'm at the cabin now, full-time. The Heron comes back most mornings. I rebuilt the dock last month, replaced the boards that had gone soft, sanded and sealed the frame. My hands are slower than they used to be, but they're steady. I sleep through the night more often than not, which is a victory I don't take for granted. The criminal case is still moving, slowly the way these things do. Sorrento took a plea. My wife's trial is pending. I don't follow it closely. My daughter sends updates sometimes. I read them, close my phone, and go back to whatever I was doing. Stacking firewood, cleaning the gutters, watching the water. People ask if I'm angry. I was. For about 3 weeks I burned with it. The kind of anger that lives in your chest and makes food taste wrong and sleep feel like a performance. But anger is expensive, and I've learned to watch my spending. What replaced it wasn't forgiveness. I want to be honest about that. It was something more practical. Disengagement. The understanding that a person I'd shared 31 years with had looked at my life, my absence, my trust, and seen raw material. Not a marriage, a structure to dismantle for parts. You can't unknow that about someone. But you can stop letting it write your next chapter. If you're listening to this and you recognize something, maybe not the specifics but the shape of it, the slow realization that someone has been rearranging your life while you weren't looking, I want to tell you one thing. The most dangerous lies aren't loud. They're administrative. They come in the form of paperwork, phone calls, signatures. They use systems built on trust to move against you quietly. The best defense isn't suspicion, it's documentation. Know where your papers are. Know who has access. Know what a power of attorney means after the surgery is over. And if you ever leave for a few days to clear your head, tell someone who loves you where you're going. Not because you owe anyone an explanation, because silence in the wrong hands becomes a story. And not everyone who writes your story wants you in the next chapter. Tell me where this reached you. I read every comment. And if your story sounds like mine, write it down. Not for me, for yourself. Because the first time you put truth on paper, it stops floating and starts standing. We share stories like these because quiet men deserve loud records. Subscribe, if that means something to you, and stay. Because this isn't the end of anything. It's the part where the dock gets rebuilt.